In order to properly interpret the book of Revelations, there are some key elements that we must understand that most teachers I have found ignore. From the very first verse, we get two important leads, stating first that Father's message had been signified by his angel to his servant John. The Greek word signified is semeino, which means signs. A sign points to something. In other words, the prophecies were written in signs, or better yet, in codes. A case in point would be that when it is speaking of physical objects, these are actually code words for hidden meanings and are not always meant to be taken literally. Why would it be written in codes? Because obviously the Almighty knew the prophecies would end up in the enemy's hands, and he only wanted his Torah-observant covenant children who believed in Yeshua as Messiah to be able to properly interpret the prophecies. Secondly, we have to establish a timeline as to when the prophecies are to begin. And there are 2 verses in the beginning and 2 verses at the end of the book, which clearly answer this question. Revelation 1:1 states that the events will begin to shortly come to pass. The word shortly is takos in Greek and means quickly, speedily, or hastily. Verse 3 states that the time for the events to start to occur is near. The Greek word for near is egos, which means at hand, or ready to begin now. The book closes out by repeating these same Greek words in chapter 22, verse 6, which states that these events must begin to take place quickly, or takos. And verse 10 states, for the time is at hand, or egos. Here is even more confirmation. In Daniel chapter 12, he is told to seal up the words of his prophecy, for they are written about the time of the end. But in Revelation 22:10, John is told just the opposite, that he should not seal up the words of the prophecy, confirming again that the events are to begin to start being fulfilled in John's day. Further confirmation of the timeline is seen when we recognize who the prophecies were intended for. In Revelation 1:11, John is told to send the prophecy to the currently existing 7 churches in Asia, evidently to both chastise and encourage them to prepare to endure the prophesied judgments which would shortly begin to fall and be fulfilled, and for them to strive to obtain the promises given as overcomers. With all these key facts in mind, we need only to gain a proper understanding of world history and church history in order to uncover the complete timeline and where we are today. Just knowing why the churches today falsely interpret the entire book of Revelations to occur only in the last 3.5 years to the last generation is also a key element and can be quite a revelation in itself. Where could they have acquired such misinformation? For this is not what the Apostle John or the early believers or the Protestant reformers believed. Quite frankly, the prophecies have been being fulfilled in the order they were written since John was given the vision. So where did we get this idea that the entire book of Revelations was written only to the last generation in the last 7 to 3.5 years prior to the Messiah's return? We have to look back to the 16th century during the Protestant Reformation, which started by Martin Luther in 1517. The Protestants, after hundreds of years of being persecuted and martyred by the millions by the Catholic Church for their apostolic Torah observance of the seventh-day Sabbath and the feast of Passover, believed the papacy to be the whore of Babylon and all the popes down through history to be the Antichrist. To combat these Protestant beliefs, 2 Jesuit priests by the name of Ribera and Bellarmine in the late 16th century were the first among many to follow who wrote and published commentaries to the book of Revelations and invented the theology called futurism, whereby in order to draw the attention off of the papacy as the mother of harlots mentioned in Revelation 17, placed the attention on a one-world Antichrist ruler that would come along in the last 7 years, who would try to set up his kingdom with the pre-trib rapture happening just before the last 3.5 years prior to the Great Tribulation. Ribera's work tried to shift the focus away from the papacy, but then he added insult to injury by taking the glory away from the fulfillment of Messiah in Daniel 9:27, where he changed the word confirm to make, saying that the Antichrist would make a covenant with the Jews that would be broken. The reference is actually to the Messiah who confirmed the covenant and then died for his people. These commentaries by these Jesuits were laughed at by the Protestants in their day. But ironically, 253 years later in 1838, Dr. Maitland discovered Ribera's work at Canterbury Church of England, and he decided to republish it. The errors of Ribera were circulated, and soon one of the leaders of the Plymouth Brethren in Ireland, John Nelson Darby, the father of dispensationalism, read them and published the work himself. And over the last 100 years, many Christians have become influenced by the lies of these Jesuit priests. Today, the situation is so bad that most Christians accept the futurist teachings without ever questioning where they originated from or what the Protestant reformers gave their lives to defend, the Torah. There is also evidence of Jesuit influence after the 1900s as they began to secretly infiltrate Protestant seminaries and teach their heresies, not only about the book of Revelations, but that the old covenants have been done away with, including the seventh-day Sabbath, the feast days in Leviticus 23, kosher, and the following of Yahuwah's Torah. It is also interesting to note that John never used the word Antichrist in the book of Revelations, but he used the word 4 times in his epistles and states that even then there were many Antichrists in the world. John states his definition of Antichrist is anyone who rejects Yeshua as coming from Elohim as the Messiah. Truly, time has become the greatest ally of deceit. There's another important issue to discuss before we get started, and that is, can the prophecies in Revelation be fulfilled twice? As of yet, I am not familiar with any prophecies in the Bible that have been fulfilled twice. I would like for you to realize how unlikely this really is from several standpoints. First of all, no one could convince me that the Father would leave his covenant Torah observant children who would be called to spill their blood by the millions as martyrs without a roadmap to follow over the last 1900 years. And this is exactly why the book of Revelation was given to John at the time it was given to him. And he was told not to seal up the words of the prophecies. Those apostolic Torah-observant believers in John's day needed a sure word from the Almighty, from someone they trusted, that would reveal to them their immediate future and a timeline for the return of Messiah. And don't think these people didn't understand John's words. After all, they understood them better than most of the majority of churchmen today, because the code it was written in, the elders could interpret because they knew their Tanakh. It uses the same code words. After all, let us not forget, according to Amos 3:7, the Almighty does nothing without revealing his secrets unto his servants, the prophets. I have come to the personal opinion, after reviewing how most of the book of Revelation has already been fulfilled, that you cannot take prophesied judgments out of their divine order in Revelation, or break them up and reapply them to some future day once they have already been fulfilled. And it is improbable for all of these prophecies to happen again in the same order as they have been being fulfilled in the last 1900 years in a short time frame of 3.5 years. Understand that the prophecies were actually recorded by John in the exact order they were going to be divinely fulfilled by Yahuwah, starting in John's day with the 4 horses of the apocalypse, which represent the first 4 broken seals. And like a daisy chain, the judgments are all connected together, one right after the other. Further proof is the fact that once the 7th seal of judgment is broken, it actually contains the 7 trumpets. And the 7th trumpet of judgment, once blown, begins the 7 bowls being poured out. So you see, the order is divinely established. And once you see how both world history and church history are associated with each of the fulfilled judgments, you will clearly understand how the judgments are all connected and fulfilled in the order they were given to John. This will ultimately answer the most important question: where are we today in the timeline and what is still yet to be fulfilled. I believe Father doesn't want us to be ignorant of this knowledge. Prophecy can only be viewed in 2020 vision in hindsight, once it has been fulfilled. Anything future can only be speculated on as to when and how Father will carry it out. And there is way too much evidence to prove that Revelation started being fulfilled in the day of the existence of the 7 churches of Asia Minor. After all, that's whom the messenger told John to give the prophecy to. One of the main reasons why the Protestant church jumps into the futurist camp is because of their ignorance of both church history and world history. The second reason as to why these prophecies cannot happen twice is a principle called the law of first mentioned, or the law of first occurrence, established by Benjamin Newton in the 1800s. This principle of interpretation states that the first mention or occurrence of a matter in Scripture establishes an unchangeable pattern, meaning that the truth, once divinely established by Yahuwah's word, cannot be altered. Consequently, this is the reason to take any verse back to its original language in order to establish its proper meaning and truth. A.T. Pearson, in the 19th century, also called this principle the divine law of first. These principles can also be applied to biblical prophecy. For once a prophecy has been given by the Almighty, and the prophecy comes to pass, it has been established in history by virtue of the fact it has been fulfilled. It is so important to have a proper mindset going into the book of Revelation if you want to gain a proper interpretation. What do I mean by proper mindset? Well, for example, when someone asks you a question about why Paul wrote something that seems to put the Torah in a viewpoint of being something to be disregarded, we know from evidence in the epistles that Paul was Torah observant, and his desire was clearly that all men be Torah observant. So with that mindset well established, obviously Paul would never condemn the Torah. So in trying to properly interpret Revelation's timeline, we must bear in mind the fact that these prophecies began to be fulfilled during the days of the existence of the 7 churches the apostles established throughout Asia Minor, as I have clearly given you the reasons why. With that mindset, and the fact the book was written in code to protect the Nazarenes, let us begin with the 4 horses of the apocalypse, the first 4 seals, starting in Revelation 6:1. Now I saw, when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures saying, with a voice like thunder, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. This is not Yeshua riding on this horse sometime in the future, as the Catholic Church would love for you to believe. First of all, the word crown here in Greek is stephanos, which is a twined wreath, commonly made of laurel leaves, and a status symbol used by the pagan Roman Empire. Rome made these crowns out of both real leaves and gold leaves, and placed these crowns on their emperors' heads, on their marble statues, as well as their coins. In contrast, Revelation 19:12, Yeshua is on a white horse, and the Greek word for crown is diadem, which is a completely different kind of crown. And rather than carrying a bow, Yeshua has a sword coming out of his mouth, signifying the Torah. This white horse represented the Cretan dynasty of emperors, who all used the symbol of the bow, the white horse, and wreaths on their heads. And both the Nazarenes and the Protestant reformers knew this. So subsequently, all 4 of the horses and riders, as we will see, represent different phases of the rise and ultimately the fall of the pagan Roman Empire. The time period of the white horse and rider was Rome during the height of her conquest, from Emperor Nerva through Marcus Aurelius, approximately 96 AD through 180 AD. This time period is well known as the Golden Age of Rome, when the empire expanded while ruled by a dynasty of 5 Cretan emperors, well known for their superior bowmanship. Rome was able to use tens of thousands of archers in battle to blacken the sky with arrows against their enemies as they rode forth conquering all the lands from what is known today as the land west of India all the way to Great Britain, and from Germany and parts of southwest Russia southward to the entire northern coast of North Africa, including Egypt. stretching over 6.5 million kilometers of earth. And when Revelation uses the term earth, it is not talking about the whole world, only the whole known earth of the Roman Empire. Rome perpetuated Hellenistic culture, the worship of pagan gods, the persecution of the Nazarenes, as well as the Jews, for they worshipped only one God, and their culture and Torah-observant lifestyle was hated by Rome. This is well-established history, and it is important to begin the timeline of Revelation in approximately 96 AD as we move forward from there with the rise and fall of the pagan Roman Empire. One important point we need to understand about the book of Revelation is that there have been many tribulations over the last 1900 years as these judgments have been fulfilled that have affected the whole earth. And the rise and fall of the Hellenistic pagan Roman Empire was the first tribulation John prophesied about. And I assure you, many of the Nazarenes believed that if they could live long enough and overcome during this time, that they would see the return of the Messiah. They had no clue it would take several thousand years for all these prophecies to be fulfilled. The persecution of the Nazarenes was intense, and only our Heavenly Father truly knows how many precious Torah-observant believers were martyred during this time by Rome. But it could easily have been in the tens of millions. It is also easy to be misled into thinking that because so many nations have followed the exact outline laid out by the four horses of the apocalypse, including the possibility of our own current nation, that they could be reapplied to even our present day forward, because a nation has to rise to power as the white horse shows us. Then that power and wealth leads them to moral decay and corruption from within. Then economic woes set in with inflation, and finally the nation dies by conquest. But do not be deceived. If you think these horses will ride again, nothing could be further from the truth. No white horse with a rider wearing a Stephanos crown, carrying a bow, and going forth conquering all the earth is going to literally happen again. But there will be more tribulation on the earth before the final great tribulation, as we will see. The white horse period of time was approximately 100 years, and thereafter the red horse prophecy also covers another approximate 100 years. Reading now Revelation 6:3. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature saying, "Come and see." Another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another. And there was given to him a great sword. This next phase, after the Cretan dynasty empire ended, the people of Rome began to kill one another, marking the beginning of Rome's downfall. The Roman sword, as the rider of the red horse carries, was a symbol of authority and power, and the time period was approximately between 180 and 284 AD. It was a period of bloodshed and civil war. There were 32 different emperors, and only one died of natural death. The rest were either assassinated or died in battle over this time period, as Roman legions warred against each other, creating civil unrest as Rome was torn apart. There were 27 usurpers to the throne by force, and what followed is an age that historians refer to as the age of Barak emperors, because throughout the 3rd century all emperors were soldiers, and all of them came to power by military coups of one sort or another. And as we know, any house divided against itself cannot stand. And in the midst of all this chaos, Torah-observant Nazarenes and Jews were killed every day for sport and entertainment. I'm Bill Sanford, trying to put the book of Revelation in proper perspective in our day.